Speaking of security, MPs are to be assigned bodyguards as part of a dramatic £31 million drive to defend Britain's democratic freedoms. The unprecedented package has been drawn up in response to an increasing concern among MPs about the level of harassment and intimidation they are facing following the conflict in Gaza. Along with providing close protection for MPs, the cash fund will surge police patrols in areas where tensions are the highest. Earlier this month, Conservative backbencher Tobias Ellwood's family home was targeted by pro-Palestinian protesters, while Mike Freer announced he would be standing down as a Tory MP at the next election after an alleged arson attack on his constituency office. Labour MPs have also found themselves being threatened. Preet Gill, who represents Birmingham Edgbaston, said threats against her life have become the norm. Well, after a tumultuous few weeks in Parliament, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer blamed each other for the febrile political atmosphere.
The Prime Minister has lost control of his party to the hordes of recruits of malcontents, the tinfoil hat brigade over there, the extremists who wreck the economy, all lining up to undermine him, humiliate him, and eventually to get rid of him.
We've seen members of Parliament's homes surrounded, their events disrupted, council meetings threatened, and just last week we saw the very rules that govern this place abused because of intimidation. While he might want to bend to mob rule, we will face down the extremists and stand up for British values.
Do you know, one of the big dangers of this as well is it becomes a sort of a self-fulfilling thing.
Yeah,
so the idea of, abusing MPs.
Yeah.
Whereas once upon a time, it wasn't that long ago, you guys will remember this, where you could just turn up in Parliament and say, I want to see my MP.
Absolutely. Put a green card in.
Indeed, and the system was, your MP came down and you had a chat with them. Even now at their own political surgeries, where you could at least get those one-to-ones, even that is more than tricky. So 31 million quid, I mean, this is a genuine dent in our democratic process. And my sense, given the tensions of what is going on so far, is that it might just get a whole lot worse before it gets better.
I really fear that. Yeah, I completely fear that. I've worried about this for the last 3 or 4 months, really. And I think that, this comes back down, I would say, something we keep discussing, leadership and the lack of it in terms of cracking down really hard whenever there is any hint of abuse and any hint of inappropriate, threatening, intimidating, violent behaviour. That demonstration outside Tobias Ellwood's house was completely unacceptable.
Right.
And yet I believe that the police at the time said that it was legitimate.
Well, this is why I lament Lee Anderson's comments, because I think they were so stupid and clumsy and baseless, and they took the oxygen out of a room of a conversation that we really need to have about extremism, about people that are not integrating into Britain, about communities that are self-isolating and not adopting British values. I find it interesting that some MPs are happy to receive the added or increased police protection, but they're not questioning the extremist ideology which has necessitated it. That's what I have a big problem with. These people that were saying, this was horrible to Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is a big boy, okay? And unfortunately, I hate the fact that MPs get abused. I think it's completely out of order. I think it discourages qualified, good people from entering public office. But at the same time, we need to actually have necessary conversations about these kinds of people that are threatening MPs, that are acting in hostile, horrible ways, that are shouting anti-Semitic statements on the streets of the capital. Why are we not focusing on that?
But I think you're absolutely right that what Lee Anderson has done has meant that a proper conversation can't then be had about the issue. And I totally understand...
a proper conversation could be had. It's just that certain people are choosing not to have that conversation and preferring instead to obsess about the words Islamophobia. So a proper conversation can be had.
Well, OK, let's look at... I mean, you say Sadiq Khan's a big boy, can look after himself. Actually, somebody has just pleaded guilty to death threats on Sadiq Khan. We know that he's got, huge... He's one of the politicians that has a huge number of death threats. And
from
it is not...
Islamists as well, ironically.
From both sides.
But it is not helpful for, conspiracy theories to be stoked and poked when we're trying to have those conversations about the proper threats. We've got MPs walking around wearing stab vests at the moment. You know, we've got 3 MPs that we know of who are having to have bodyguards, and those are really serious issues. And one of the best things about our democracy is the surgery process, where an MP can hold a constituency surgery and people can walk in. We've had Stephen Timms attacked in his surgery, David Amos murdered in his surgery. These things are going to become a thing of the past.
Well, Sadiq Khan, as you say, he has round-the-clock protection, 15 bodyguards, which is normally reserved just for royalty. And yes, it's from extremists, Islamic extremists, but it's also from far-right people. He's getting it from both sides. When people like Liana say...
Do we know he's getting it from both sides?
Yeah, the threats have come from both. This is according to the Met. This is what the Met have said. So it is from both sides. From the Muslim side of things, it's because it's perceived his support for LGBT.
Right.
Which people obviously are against. But all of that being said, I know if it's my local MP is getting a death threat, I think it should be then that constituency that is paying for it, not the whole country as a whole. Now, of course, it's not always going to be people from that constituency who are doing the threats. But generally speaking, if it's Rochdale, then OK, Rochdale, you're now going to lose out on X amount of hundred thousands of quid that we would have used to better your area because...
Well, that would work if this country wasn't a balkanized mess. So at the moment, people don't even feel an affinity to their own neighbour. They don't know who lives 3 doors down. We don't feel sort of any community ties. If someone commits a crime...
I'm talking about hitting people in their pockets.
Well, but that's the point, though. You're hitting communities
that
don't feel like communities. And like you said, sometimes these people are coming from outside of these communities. I understand the principle, but the overarching point is these people and their values, not punishing people in communities that don't even feel like communities, that don't know where these people are coming from.
I've just remembered this as well. A few years ago, when John Major was it was after John Major was Prime Minister. Prime Ministers don't always get to do their political surgeries. Somebody stands in for them, of course, because they're very busy, but sometimes they do. And we took a call from a guy who went to see John Major on an issue he had, and he went back 2 more times. John Major was the Prime Minister at the time. 2 more times, and between him and John Major, they sorted this problem out.
Love it.
He wrote some letters, the guy wrote some letters.
Yeah.
Can you imagine today a Prime Minister sitting in a community centre or the local library or his local office having a one-to-one with somebody? That's how it was, and that's not that many years ago.
But is that not a symptom of the fact that our politics has become so polarised? And
I think it's also social media. So I think that there isn't actually fundamentally a reason why that shouldn't happen, because a Prime Minister could perfectly well have the security required to make that happen. People could go through checks. I think the fear would be that the person the trust is gone.
Yes.
So that this constituent would immediately go out and tweet about it or record it or
it'd be some sort of spoof, some kind of joke.
Precisely that.
Or somebody would put a video out beforehand saying, the Prime Minister's going to be in his home constituency, let's get down there and have kick off, etc. And make some horrendous video to advertise the fact. So.